Looking at these two monsters, he wanted to see what they were capable of, but they had not yet used their magic. Kazuro had never fought two monsters at once, and it scared him a little. Standing in a defensive stance, he waited for the right moment and tried to find opportunities to attack. There was a certain uncertainty in the look, but there was more than enough determination to act. He looked at the monsters and Clown Girl with his minions, waiting for an attack. Remembering that while he and the fat man were sitting in a cafe, there was news on TV that talked about a gang of robbers and murderers attacking the absorbers. While Kajuro was distracted by thoughts of what he saw, the monster pirate used his power and began vomiting his incomprehensible substance at the guy. The terrible stench was unbearable and began to spin the head and cause a state of intoxication. Such Kajuro didn't expect it. It was one of the types of stun magic. While Kazuro was staggering in all directions and could not collect himself, the clown decided to use her strength and finish off the little brat. She summoned two high-rank monsters at once. Her strength was high. Kajuro clearly did not expect this. They looked like a mummy and a demon with wings. His facial expression spoke of inability to act and helplessness. Realizing that while he is under the camp, he cannot act, and he must at least block their attacks and hold out. The Clown Girl orders her monsters to attack Kajuro while he is in the camp. Her sinister look says that she intends to kill the guy. The mummy monster uses its magic by kneeling down and sending its hands underground. Kajuro understands that now he will be attacked, tries to somehow group himself and squints his eyes. Sweat begins to run down your face in anticipation of pain. The blow to the face was so fast that you couldn't see where it was coming from. This took Kajuro a little by surprise, since he did not see the blow itself. It is followed by another blow, and another. Finally, the feelings from the camp begin to return, and Kajuro comes to his senses. Now he manages to jump away. These were the bandages of a mummy monster moving at great speed from underground. The Clown Girl began to get angry that the guy was not dying for so long, and began indignantly shouting to her monsters and comrades to quickly deal with him. Kazuro skillfully recovered from the mummy's attacks. Trying to find the right moment to attack, he waits for the enemy to make a mistake. The bandits begin to get nervous and tell the monsters to attack together and quickly deal with the guy. While the mummy was attacking the guy, the other monsters began to come closer to attack together. Seeing that the monsters began to gather, Kajuro realized that this was the right moment to attack and began to use his power. Being in the air at the time of the attack, the monsters did not suspect the guy's strength and did it thoughtlessly without fear of anything. Kazuro uses the powers of the previously absorbed Busty Beauty and activates her. Emerging from his mana, a Busty Beauty plays a melody on her zither, blocking movement and causing anyone to plunge into fear. From what they hear, the monsters begin to fall into a stupor and plunge into their fears. The waves act on them with great force. This took them by surprise. The bandits also hear this melody and try to close their ears not to fall under the influence of the magic of the stun. They try their best and writhe from trying. Kazuro, realizing that the monsters will not stand in a stupor for a long time, decides to quickly kill them using a monster with a chainsaw. A monster with a chainsaw appears, seeing the monsters, and begins to run towards them with a thirst for murder. His eyes are full of abnormal joy from the upcoming battle. Kajuro yells at him to deal with them quickly and have fun. Encouraging the monster with the chainsaw in every possible way, he hopes to quickly deal with the monsters and their owners. A monster with a chainsaw, already in anticipation of a brutal massacre and a lot of blood, is preparing to attack and begins to start its saw. Kazuro sees that stun magic also works on absorbers. Standing in a stupor, they cannot control their monsters, and this is the right time to take them out of the battle. Reflecting, he thinks that this is the only chance to win. His look is filled with determination, and after what they did, he is ready to take extreme measures. Kazuro orders a monster with a chainsaw to attack the absorbers because they are more dangerous, and then deal with the monsters. Reluctantly, the chainsaw monster agrees and attacks Clown Girl, swinging a chainsaw in flight, ready to cut it down. Hitting with all his might, sparks flew in all directions. After such a blow, there would be nothing left of her. Unexpectedly for Kazuro and the monster with a chainsaw, she is saved by a demon monster with wings. Apparently, the magic of the stun has a very weak effect on him. Having jumped a decent distance with the girl, they were safe from unexpected attacks. The monster with the chainsaw got up after the blow and began looking for a target. The clown, standing in the arms of her monster, with an ominous grin and gaze, she said that her top-rank monster and Kajuro's pathetic attacks would not help him in any way. She was stronger than him. Chainsaw notices Clownshaw's associates, who, while they were under the camp, vulnerable targets stood right in front of him. Without thinking twice, he attacked them. The thirst for blood again took over the mind of the monster with a chainsaw. The girl in clown makeup was scared for her partners and started screaming at them to come to their senses. Her eyes showed the horror of accepting the worst. From a strong blow from a chainsaw, a fan of sharpening his maple loses his leg. Being stunned by the magic of the zither of a busty monster, he does not yet feel pain or awareness of what happened. Kazuro shouts at the monster with the chainsaw to not lose control and finish them off quickly. The risk of losing began to increase. The stun time is not unlimited. Seeing a severed leg on the asphalt, the chainsaw begins to salivate and the thirst for hunger awakens. He looks greedily at the leg and cannot help himself. Throwing the chainsaw on the ground, the monster begins to greedily eat the leg, loudly slurping and not paying attention to anything. Kajuro doesn't like this. The level of control over the monster is too low for him to listen to him unquestioningly. The busty monster's magic was coming to an end. The monsters began to come to their senses and are preparing to attack. They were very angry and mercilessly wanted to deal with Kajuro. The pirate with the barrel came to his senses, heard the loud cry of the owner and turned around to look. The owner came to his senses and saw that he had no leg. The wound was bleeding heavily. A monster with a chainsaw sat next to him and ate his leg. Screams of horror could be heard tens of meters away. Seeing that the chainsaw was still distracted by eating his owner's leg, the pirate decided to jump on him from a height and hit him with his barrel. Hitting his back with all his might, the saw drops his leg, which he chewed so deliciously, and falls to the ground. By interfering with the monster's meal with a chainsaw, the pirate incurs the wrath and fury of the chainsaw. The loss of a fresh piece of flesh greatly angered the chainsaw monster. Grabbing the pirate's face with his hand, the monster with the chainsaw hit him on the ground with all his might. Such a blow was fatal for the pirate with the barrel. Everyone around was horrified by what they saw. The strength of the monster with the chainsaw was incredible. While Chainsaw was distracted by eating the pirate, the others decided to run and, controlling their bandages, the mummy began to envelop the guy without a leg. Worried about their comrade, the bandits quickly began to wrap his leg with bandages. Writhing in pain and blood loss, he tried to stay conscious. They grabbed him by the shoulders and began to drag him into the car. The clown was very worried about what had happened and looked tensely at her comrade. Having put him in a taxi, it was time to quickly take him to the doctor. The pain from the loss of his leg and blood made his body go numb. He fought with all his might not to pass out. Having sent her partners to the doctor, the clown girl was very unhappy and wanted to take revenge on Kazuro by taking his life. Climbing onto her monster, Clownshaw wanted to attack Kazuro, but gathering her thoughts, she realized that by succumbing to emotions alone, she could lose. Therefore, I decided to retreat. Seeing that the bandits who had kidnapped him were retreating, Kazuro was glad that it was all over. He was able to win the fight. He looked at the departing silhouette of a demon with wings carrying Clownshaw, and the thought did not leave him that this would not be their last meeting. Suddenly, the thought comes to mind that while he and the fat man were filling their bellies, eating all sorts of goodies, a girl was shown on TV destroying monsters. She looked a lot like the clown. The facial features were very similar. On TV, they showed a girl with a bow and a teddy bear. She didn't look like a child, but very dangerous. Then he remembered her appearance. Looking at the phone, he saw how late it was already. He wanted to quickly get home and go to bed. A red eye appeared and began to ask Kajuro why he didn't use it in the battle. Kazuro said that he was ashamed to release such a cool monster against such petty monsters, and would wait for a more opportune moment. Red Eye's ego was boosted, and he wasn't angry at the guy. Realizing that there is a long road ahead of him home, he thoughtfully remembers that the monster with a chainsaw is still having fun with the corpse of a pirate. Chainsaw sat cross-legged. He was sad that all the opponents had left him without a brutal, bloody battle. After absorbing the monster back, Kazuro notices a large yellow stone remaining in the place of the pirate's corpse. Picking up the stone, he was already glad that he did not leave the battle empty-handed, and the monster with a chainsaw quite easily dealt with the pirate. Looking at the new stone, Kazuro already had an idea of how much such mining could cost. But remembering Clownshaw's words that the stones could be used somehow, he thought about it. It was dark and various sounds began to appear around. Annoying the boy, he began to look around and start walking home. At that moment, the bandit's car parked near the abandoned hangar. A nurse was called in to try to put stitches on his leg to stop the bleeding. The guy was in pain. Clenching the stick with his teeth so as not to scream and give away their location, he endured the torment. Having stopped the bleeding and placed dense tissue on the cut site, the nurse sutures with a needle with a thick and dense thread. The girl in clown makeup supported her partner in every possible way and tried to distract him from the pain. The car driver and the mummy monster standing next to them also supported the guy. The mummy had a basin with bloody bandages that needed to be disposed of. The girl crying into a basin of water understood that she was to some extent to blame for what had happened, and blamed herself. After removing her makeup, she promised to get even with Kajuro and kill him. While he is alive, she will not calm down to finish what she started. Finally, Kajuro reached home. The lights were dim and in need of replacement, but the homeowners didn't care. Entering the room, he looked at the bed and longed to go to bed quickly. My legs were so heavy from the long walk that they needed a massage. Falling onto the bed, he could barely force himself to undress and lie down in the soft and warm bed. Kajuro yawned heavily. He had an exhausting day with adventures that made him shiver. Silence and tranquility were all that interested him now. Hearing loud screams from the top floor, Kazuro was irritated and was willing to go to great lengths for silence and deep sleep. Eyes covered with bloody wreaths and bags under the eyes confirmed the extreme fatigue of our hero. I was surprised at the impudence of the homeowners, who forbade everyone to make noise after 11, and they themselves organized a karaoke party. A brilliant plan matured in his head on how to teach the homeowners a lesson, calling on a busty beauty. With a grin, he imagined the owners' faces when a monster appeared in their house. Initiating the busty monster into the insidious plan, he anticipated the joy of finally teaching these greedy house owners a lesson. Meanwhile, the boy sang into the microphone with all his voice, and his parents applauded him. The guy was not gifted with a voice, but his parents supported his children's joy. Trying to outshout himself, the boy shouted to the whole house, and the parents, not paying attention to this, rejoiced at their son's musical skills. The boy sang a song from his favorite anime, and there was no limit to the joy. The parents, applauding, tried in every possible way to sing along with the baby. Suddenly, the mother felt goosebumps run through her body from the cold, and was a little distracted from her son's performance. Having told his husband about this, he decided that it was probably getting cold outside and suggested closing the window. Enjoying his son's performance and the way he sang, he did not notice anything around him and simply enjoyed the evening. Continuing to shout into the microphone, the boy began to dance to the beat of the music. The parents applauded all this time without distracting the baby. Suddenly, the lights went out in the apartment and the music stopped. Everyone wondered what was happening. Mom, with a trembling voice, says that the TV is still working and there's a woman in a pink outfit on it. The busty monster played a melody that instilled fear in the listeners. Parents didn't understand how this was possible. They looked with apprehension and were pretty frightened. The boy began to cry in fear, thinking that it was a monster. The father grabs the remote control and, in an attempt to press some button with trembling hands, switches the channel. The picture disappeared, the disgusting hiss of the disconnected antenna. It wasn't particularly calming. The father begins to reassure his family that everything is fine. It's just a glitch in the TV program. The mother, exhaling calmly, hoped that this was so. Opening their eyes and looking at their husband, mother and son were horrified to see behind him a terrible monster appearing from the TV. Raising his head slowly, the man saw a creature with huge eyes and a big toothy smile eager to kill them. Kajuro, already lying in bed, hears screams of horror and tries to sleep with a calm, light smile. Along the way, remembering that she had to absorb the monster back, no matter what she did here, realizing that now no one will bother him, Kazuro tries to sleep and rest. A warm blanket envelops him and helps him fall asleep faster. Waking up in the morning cheerful and in a good mood, Kazuro went to the store to buy food. The same homeowner and his son were walking towards him. Kajuro greeted them, realizing that he had given them an unforgettable evening yesterday. He, smiling, notices that the boy is holding his cheek and is very dissatisfied. Kazuro is tempted to make fun of the boy, but barely restraining himself, he doesn't do it. The father, with a very tired face, sighing tiredly, tells Kajuro that they were attacked by a terrible monster yesterday, while they were having a cultural evening. Kajuro points out that they could summon the music monster with their singing. Trying to hold back his laughter, he tried to speak seriously. The father hit his son on the butt and said that he had brought this fate upon them. There will be no more singing. The boy falls to the floor screaming and agrees to never sing again. Seeing how the boy got it for his passion for music, Kazuro, feeling guilty, offers to help and deal with the monster. The landlord looks at the guy and thinks he's lucky they're renting to a monster eater. Kazuro, trying to figure out how to pretend to destroy monsters, suggests using a ritual to provide them with protection and a shield from monsters. The boy's father agrees with everything Kazuro says and suggests not to hesitate, but to carry out the ritual as quickly as possible. Kazuro, blushing with joy and the opportunity to mock them, pretending to be doing something important, happily agrees. He takes water with salt, and pretending that it is a magic potion, begins to spray the apartment, not missing a single place. The family looks at what is happening with a slightly surprised face and does not interfere. And then Kazuro comes up with a brilliant idea. He takes a mouthful of potion to do another dirty trick on the owners. Having doused everyone with water and salt, they were a little surprised but tried not to show it, thinking that it is necessary. Now Kajuro has finished the process of applying protection to them and their home. The parents rejoiced and thanked Kazuro. The landlord even allowed us not to pay for this month. As I left the apartment, the phone rang in my pants pocket. Kajuro reached out his hand to see who was calling him. It was the chubby guy that Kazuro loved to eat with so much. He offered to play a mobile game with him and have fun. He immediately agreed, because it was his favorite MMO. Arriving home, Kazuro sat down at the table and, saying that he would now create hell for the enemy, launched the game. Having joined the composition of the puffball, they began to wait for opponents for battle, simultaneously discussing and selecting a character for the game. The fat man told Kajuro that there was a new update recently, and new characters were added. Seeing that the red voice character had appeared, Kajuro was very happy, because now he would be able to evaluate all the monster's skills and practice controlling them in battle. While waiting for the players to be selected, Kazuro asked Puffy how his day was and what he planned to do on the weekend. The selection of allies and opponents was completed. Now they could play the game. While waiting for the countdown to end, Kajuro thought through a strategy on where to go to attack. Standing in ambush, he waited for the right moment to attack, and he also saw a familiar character, also added to the game. It was a mummy. Paying attention to this, he saw an opportunity to find the vulnerability of this monster, so that if he met it again, he would know how to fight against such a thing. After waiting for the mummy to come closer, the red voice uses his ult and tries to destroy the enemy with a horizontal tornado. Seeing that the monster managed to dodge the ult, Kazuro was a little surprised. Apparently the mummy had good speed and guessed that there might be an ambush. After dodging, the mummy decided to attack the red eye. Kazuro expected this and wanted to try another move. Pressing the skill button, he expected it to work as it should and crush the monster. The attack of the bandages was successfully stopped and played a cruel joke against the mummy. This red eye skill is very useful and successfully hit the enemy. The mummy lost. Now Kajuro knew the method of success in front of such a monster. It turns out that Clown Girl also played this game. Sitting on a sun lounger, she screamed nervously from yet another loss to the same opponent. Kajuro, enjoying the game, easily wins every fight and becomes familiar with all the Red Eye's techniques. Each attack of the Red Eye turns into another victory for him. Mummy has nothing to oppose the abilities of the Red Eye. Each attack of the stubborn mummy was predicted and counterattacked in time. Kajuro tried all the skills and understood how good his monster was. The clown was very upset by a series of lost fights, that anger and the desire for revenge did not allow her to think sensibly and retreat. She was very angry with the Red Eye player, screaming and writing nasty words about him in the chat. Having won the battle with a devastating score for the enemy, Kajuro threw his hands up with a joyful cry. He hadn't had this much fun in a game for a long time. Seeing insults in the chat, he decided to look at the player's profile as a mummy. Naturally, based on the nickname in the game, he had no idea who it was, but he was obliged to write a couple of caustic words in response. Afterwards, he remembered how good the red voice was with new abilities, remembering the words of the clown that he does not know how to use the stones and only sells them. Kajuro thought about this. Putting his hand in his pocket, he began to look for stones. The red eye skills are strong, but if they can somehow be upgraded with the help of stones, it will be very useful. Having taken out the stones, he noticed that the red ones were starting to glow. Apparently, they were suitable for leveling up the skill. All that remained was to understand how to use them. Bringing them to his face, he felt the stones begin to turn into mana and penetrate his voice. Approaching the mirror, he looked at himself and saw that the red voice had become brighter and emitted a strong glow. Kajuro felt the power of the new skills, and the appearance of the eye became more terrifying for the enemy. Realizing this, he quickly wanted to test it in battle. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The hero was surprised because he was not expecting anyone. Different thoughts began to enter his head, from the worst to the banal distribution of invitations to establishments. A little afraid to walk up to the door and ask, "Who's there?" Kajuro stood there without making a sound. It was a warm summer day outside. School was over, so he had no idea who might be standing outside the door. Having collected himself from bad thoughts, he simply walked to the door and opened it. A bald old man stood on the threshold. This elderly man introduced himself as the director of one of the universities, where they would like to see Kazuro as a student. Kazuro, realizing that this is very good news, shakes hands with the director of the university and invites him to go into the room to discuss the conditions of study. The old man was quite calm and showed some trust and a desire to find out more about which university he represented. Suddenly, the director immediately hands over the admission form and offers to fill it out. Their university is prestigious and very large. The teachers are all qualified monster absorbers. Taking the form in surprise, Kajuro began to closely study what exactly this university was and what chances he had to achieve success there. The name of the university confused the guy a little, because he had never heard of it before. The university called FU Fell did not inspire much confidence in Kazuro, and he began to ask the director which famous graduates studied with him. How long has this university been around, and why hasn't he heard of it before? The director was a little perplexed, since he could scare off the guy with his weak group of graduates, and the fact that the university was very unpopular. The weakest people who had not entered anywhere usually ended up there. Trying to come up with strong words for the guy, the director mentioned that his studies were free, and the strongest teachers would teach him. To which Kajuro asked, "What are the names of those very strong ones?" "If so, then they are known," Kajuro said. Indignant at the guy's words, the director very emotionally began to demonstrate his skills, saying that he was one of such teachers. Having calmed down a little, the director began to encourage Kazuro to sign the admission paper, and he himself would provide decent conditions for studying with his own eyes. Standing in the doorway for some time now stood a charming lady with glasses and a pendant around her neck. She clearly did not pass by, but came to her destination. Introducing herself as the rector of one of the most famous universities in the country, she greeted Kazuro. Having said that it was sent by the Minister of Education himself, the director and Kazuro's mouths dropped open. They clearly didn't expect this. The director's chances of inviting the guy to his school were fading before his eyes. Coming closer, she, smiling, extended her hand to Kazuro and offered him a place at the best university in the city. Stretching out his hand in response, Kajuro turns his attention to her hand and notices the many monsters that were absorbed. She was clearly very strong and amazingly beautiful. Taking out from her purse an application form for admission to the University of the Supreme Devourers named after Mao Qi. All the cards were clearly against the director of the Fu Fel University. Having taken his form from Kazuro, he lowered his head and realized that there was nothing to choose here. Obviously, he has no chance against such an institution. The old man had already begun to leave. At that moment, the rector of a prestigious university rang. At this time, Kajuro studied her invitation and stood in bewilderment. The call was from the Minister of Education. probably to make sure that Kazuro accepted the conditions and agreed to enter their elite university. Suddenly, shouts were heard from the phone about a ban on Kazuro's admission. Everyone was surprised by this decision, especially Kazuro. The director, stopping in the aisle, began to listen and see a chance to take the boy for himself. Kazuro stood in bewilderment while the rector tried to talk to the minister. Her surprise at this statement was understandable because she personally observed Kazuro during the exam and saw potential in him. Shouting on the phone yielded nothing, and all that was said was that the ban came from influential members of the university management. While she was trying to reason with the minister, Kazuro began to understand that the last fight was clearly involved. The girl he fought with looked like one of the strongest students of the Mao-Chi Supreme Devourer's institution. This means that she influenced this decision. After finishing the phone conversation, the rector said with great regret that the guy would not be able to study with them. This was an order from the Educational Council with the Minister of Education. Kazuro, understanding the essence of what was happening, showing dissatisfaction and awareness of who kidnapped him, stood looking at the table and sighed. The rector patted him on the shoulder and said that he was very talented, and his chances of becoming the strongest monster absorber were great. Unfortunately, the Minister of Education can influence all educational institutions, and one refusal may not be enough. There is no way he can get into the world of monsters alone, and he fights there. This right is only given at universities. The ban on this is very serious, and the punishment is very strict. Realizing the seriousness of what was happening, Kazuro began to suspect that he no longer had a chance to succeed. Such powerful people can destroy everything he is so eager to gain. The old man, standing in the passage and hearing the conversation, closes the door, thereby drawing attention to himself. By clapping his hands, he shows pleasure and the opportunity that has arisen. Handing back his admission form in an aggressive manner, he joyfully shouts that Kazuro can enter his university. Being a little-known Fufel establishment, the minister will have little chance of influencing Kazuro's fate. Moreover, the director promises that nothing threatens him within the walls of their university. Kazuro, concerned about the lack of the right to enter the world of monsters, decided to clarify whether the director has such a right. Stroking his beard and grinning at the beautiful rector, the director claims that he is famous for his disregard for the Ministry of Education, and of course, he has the right to get into the world of monsters. Hearing such pleasant words, Kazuro was very happy that he could continue to improve his skills in battles and achieve success, even in such a little-known educational institution. Kazuro an admission form and asks him to sign it. Ego joy does not leave the face. The gait was as if he was dancing. The joyful couple discussed admission and the possibility of studying to influence the leveling of skills and their use in battles with monsters. The director, with a big smile, promised to help the boy in all matters. Telling how big the park was near their university and a great place to train, he encouraged Kazuro to sign in every possible way. There are large residential complexes and a market nearby. All amenities are within walking distance. Kazuro decides to sign the document. Considering that the Minister of Education can in every possible way interfere with his choice of where to enroll, you have to choose from what gives you at least a chance to become great. Having signed the document, the director thanked the guy and wished him a pleasant rest, because after the holidays, he will study at the most underrated educational institution. The director also suggested that the boy tell his family about his admission, so that they wouldn't worry that the guy wouldn't get in anywhere. Kazuro immediately agreed and began calling his parents. The director was glad that he had snatched such a talent from under the noses of the most prestigious universities in the country. The rector looked at them, realizing that something was not clean here. She looked at Kazuro and didn't understand why such a talent was rejected and forbidden to enroll. Maybe the boy had annoyed someone? After such a day, Kazuro wanted to take a walk around the city at night. The windows were lit up, there were a lot of people walking around, and everyone was having a good time. Passing by the monster seller, Kazuro noticed him. Such merchants can sell quite dangerous monsters with very rare abilities. Moving closer to look at the monster in the cage, Kazuro wanted to evaluate the monster and maybe even buy it. The monster looked like a golem from Kojuro's favorite movie. Saliva dripped from his mouth, torn clothes and bulging eyes did not show the monster to be strong. The cage was covered with special scrolls to block the monster's abilities, so that there was no threat to others. Looking at such a weak monster, he remembered how sellers deceive monsters. Without understanding the product themselves, they try to mark it up at 3 times the price. The seller kindly tried to trick Kojuro into buying a monster with weak abilities, passing them off as very strong. Realizing that the seller did not understand monsters, Kojuro tried to reduce the price to a ridiculous level, telling the seller that the monster was weak and not worth a penny. The seller, without showing his ignorance, simply offered such a reasonable client a good 10% discount on the purchase, and he would give the cage as a gift. Kojuro began to taunt them, showing his reluctance to pay more, and offered a 50% discount with a cage and a large pink stone to boot. Showing your greedy gaze and starting to lick your lips. It looked like he wanted to devour them. Seeing this, the seller got scared and, hearing such a proposal, became pretty angry with the guy. The monster was also irritated by the humiliation he heard and expressed his dissatisfaction by shouting. Seeing the boy's gaze, the monster sensed his aura and became quite frightened. After all, the absorbed monsters of Kojuro strengthened the aura, thereby showing the monsters who was standing in front of them. Considering that after improving the Red Eye's skills it became a high level, then the guy already had 3 high-rank monsters. The seller, seeing how the guy intimidates the monster and scares away the customers, shouts for him to get out. Smiling at the humiliation of these scoundrels, Kojuro began to leave. Throwing his hands behind his head and whistling, the satisfied boy walked away in search of something interesting. The seller, clutching his chest, became very nervous with anger and sat down to rest. At the same time, Tsuyuki and her brother were walking around the market. After the exam, she could not forget Kojuro's humiliation and kept thinking about how to take revenge on him. Suddenly, anger creeps through her body as she sees a familiar silhouette in the distance. The outline was very similar to Kojuro, whom she hated greatly. Coming closer, she made sure it was him and began screaming in anger. Meanwhile, Kojuro examined the seller's goods and drove him crazy, paying attention to all sorts of little things. Tsuyuki told her brother Fen that this is the same guy who insulted her, and he needs to be taught a lesson. Fen looked at Kojuro with contempt and a desire to humiliate.